It was late afternoon on Suncrest Beach. Daniel Hayes, a hardworking, weary single dad at 35, was walking near his company's upscale team-building event at the beach. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, ran off to hunt seashells. Daniel approached a temporary changing tent on the sand. Suddenly, his stunning, incredibly powerful boss, CEO Elena Voss, 28, was inside, changing. A harsh gust blew the curtain wide open. Daniel froze, deeply shocked, accidentally seeing far too much of her. Elena whipped around, her icy gaze burning. "You! What exactly are you looking at?" Daniel was struck dumb. This moment of agonizing embarrassment would change his entire life. Daniel instantly spun around, raising his hands defensively. "I am so sorry. I truly did not mean to look." Elena quickly pulled a large towel around herself and stepped out from behind the torn curtain. She was proud, cold, and flushing crimson, with a noticeable mixture of fury and deep shame. Several employees walking by witnessed the confrontation and immediately started whispering among themselves. He peeked at the CEO while she was changing. Daniel desperately wanted to explain the accident, but Elena cut him off before he could speak, her voice dangerously low and controlled. "Follow me now." She dragged him to a secluded, rocky corner of the beach, far away from the crowds and the company event. "Why were you standing so close to the changing area in the first place?" Daniel explained honestly, his voice strained with tension. "I was looking for my daughter, Miss Voss. She ran off towards the water a moment ago." As if on cue, Lily ran up and hugged Daniel's leg, her voice full of excitement and innocence. "Daddy, I found a heart-shaped seashell." Elena stopped speaking completely. The unexpected sight of the loving father and daughter froze her, and her sharp, accusatory tone immediately softened, if only for a second. However, the intense embarrassment of the incident still made her deeply uncomfortable, and she maintained her professional distance. Throughout the rest of the company team-building event, employees continued to whisper behind Daniel's back, their words cruel and judgmental. The poor single father actually dared to glimpse the untouchable CEO changing? What gall! Daniel endured the relentless humiliation, focusing only on Lily and refusing to engage in any arguments or defenses. Lily, completely unaware of the tension, innocently took Elena's hand, looking up with wide eyes and asking, "Do you want to play sandcastle with me, Ms. Elena?" Elena was visibly taken aback by the genuine, unguarded approach. No one in her strictly professional life had ever dared to approach her this way. Daniel offered one final, sincere apology, hoping that the uncomfortable situation would end there, allowing them both to return to their normal, separate lives. As she walked past him later that evening, Elena paused, her voice a low, warning murmur. "Be warned, Daniel. This is absolutely not the end of what happened just now. You need to understand that." The very next morning at the Hearthstone headquarters, every single person in the office looked at Daniel like he was either a predator or a common criminal. A particularly rude colleague walked past his cubicle and sneered suggestively, "Watch out for the CEO changing today, Daniel. Remember to avert your eyes or you might find yourself out of a job." Daniel kept his head down, maintaining a deliberate silence. His only goal was to perform his essential maintenance job perfectly and avoid any possible conflict. Daniel wasn't just a repairman. He was a highly skilled certified industrial mechanic with a unique aptitude for legacy systems, a fact his younger, degree-obsessed peers deliberately ignored. He handled the complex machinery that kept the entire executive floor functional, and he did it flawlessly. Suddenly, Elena appeared, gliding through the office floor in an expensive, luxurious white power suit, exuding her usual aura of absolute authority and status that kept everyone at a distance. But when her eyes swept across the room and briefly landed on Daniel, the intensity of her stare froze him to his core for several agonizing seconds. She carried herself with such rigid perfection that it almost seemed like the vulnerable woman from the beach was a hallucination. Moments later, a secretary requested Daniel's presence in a private, high-security meeting room on the executive floor. Elena sat across a sleek glass table from him. She deliberately set her ceramic coffee cup down, the clinking sound echoing loudly in the silence, and spoke directly. When you saw me that day, Daniel, tell me honestly, what exactly did you see? Daniel stammered, completely choked up. He knew he couldn't give a superficial answer, yet he was deeply unsure how to phrase the full truth without further damaging his career. He finally spoke honestly, looking her straight in the eyes with sincerity. I saw Miss Voss, a very strong woman who in one sudden, unexpected moment looked incredibly vulnerable, human, and frustrated. Elena was profoundly startled by his answer. This was not the stammering, self-serving apology or lewd comment she had been mentally preparing herself to hear and dismiss. Her professional mask twitched. Vulnerable. No one had ever used that word to describe her and survived the conversation. Elena remained completely silent for what felt like a lifetime, her gaze unreadable as she processed his unexpected depth. She wasn't just fighting the embarrassment, she was fighting the sudden, unsettling recognition of herself in his words. Breaking the tension, she leaned forward slightly, her posture still intimidating, and asked the crucial follow-up question. Did you discuss this incident with anyone at all, Daniel? Because if this becomes gossip, I will know. Daniel responded firmly, his integrity clear and unwavering. No, Miss Voss. The privacy of others is not a tool for my advancement. I do not use another person's moment of misfortune or mistake to fuel a petty, office story. What happened is between you and me. Against her will, a deep, private corner of Elena's eyes softened momentarily, a reaction of respect she couldn't rationalize or control. His response carried more quiet dignity than any corporate loyalty speech she had ever heard. She realized he was entirely unlike the ambitious, backstabbing executives she dealt with daily. She dismissed him, trying to regain the emotional distance he had shattered. Later that day near noon, a sudden cold wind swept violently through the city, and the temperature dropped sharply. Daniel went to pick Lily up from her school early, sensing something was wrong. Lily was warm and flushed, her face bright red, clearly developing a slight fever that worried him deeply. Daniel, cradling his sick daughter tightly in his arms, felt a surge of desperation. He had no choice but to rush back to the office to complete an urgent maintenance task required before the workday ended, as the system was vital for a major incoming transaction. As he carried Lily, wrapped in his jacket, through the reception area, a group of high-level employees, the same ones gossiping the day before, laughed mockingly, pointing fingers. Bringing a sick child into a professional environment? Classic desperation. Such poor standards from the help. Should have stayed home where he belongs. Their cruelty was calculated to wound. Elena happened to be walking past at that exact moment, heading toward the lobby exit, and heard their callous comment clearly, the word desperation hitting her like a stone. She saw not the maintenance man, but the loving father struggling under impossible pressure, a mirror of the struggle she herself often faced behind closed doors. Elena stopped, pivoted abruptly, and walked over to Daniel. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder, asserting her authority, and said, her voice unusually soft, laced with genuine, surprising concern. Take the child up to my private office immediately. There is a small infirmary kit. It is much warmer and quieter there, and you can finish your work. I will personally ensure you are not disturbed. Daniel stared at her, utterly surprised and profoundly confused. The cold, impenetrable woman who had threatened him with his job the day before was suddenly showing unexpected, fierce, and genuine concern for his daughter's well-being. The lines between their worlds were starting to blur irrevocably. In her luxurious, expansive private office, Elena carefully laid Lily on her plush, velvet sofa, covered her with a thick cashmere blanket, and immediately began to prepare a cup of warm ginger tea herself from a small hidden pantry. She moved with an unexpected grace and tenderness, entirely unlike her boardroom persona. Lily, feverish but now comforted and safe, reached out and grabbed Elena's hand, whispering sweetly, "You are as beautiful as a fairy princess, and you smell like flowers." Elena laughed softly in response, a completely uninhibited, genuine sound that was incredibly rare and clearly stunned Daniel into silence, showing him a new, unguarded side of her. Suddenly, Mr. Davies, a high-level department executive known for his relentless arrogance and a belief that he should have Elena's job, stormed into the office without knocking. He stopped dead, seeing the CEO attending to a child, a spectacle he viewed as unprofessional weakness, and spoke loudly with undisguised contempt. The CEO playing nursemaid to a low-level maintenance man's child? That is truly ridiculous, Miss Voss, and unprofessional. What on earth are you doing? Daniel immediately lowered his head, bracing for the inevitable public humiliation that was about to follow, wishing the ground would swallow him whole. Elena slowly rose to her full height, her eyes hardening into an arctic glare that promised immediate retribution for the disrespect. What exactly was that incredibly inappropriate comment you just made, Mr. Davies? You seem to have forgotten your place. The executive sneered, confident in his corporate standing and perceived status as an heir apparent. Miss Voss, you should not be associating with a poor, single father who has already demonstrated questionable morals by peeking at you. It dilutes your image and our company's prestige to be seen with him. This is not a nursery. He gestured toward Daniel with undisguised scorn. Freeze moment. Elena's next words cut through the office air, cold and precise, instantly silencing everyone present in the adjacent corridor who had gathered to listen to the confrontation. Then tell me, Mr. Davies, what gives you the right to be here, in my office, demanding my time, when the person you look down upon is 10 times more valuable and capable than you are at solving the crisis we face right now? The executive's face turned ash white with shock and embarrassment. He stammered a few inadequate, mumbled apologies and quickly backed out of the room, utterly defeated by her sudden, fierce, and public defense. He had miscalculated her tolerance for insolence and her loyalty to competence. Daniel watched the exchange, a profound sense of shock washing over him. He had never witnessed anyone, let alone his CEO, defend him with such fierce, immediate protectiveness, sacrificing her professional detachment to protect his dignity. Moments after the confrontation, a secretary burst into the room with genuine panic. Miss Voss, it's the core operating system. Catastrophic failure across all major transaction platforms. We're losing millions per minute. It can't identify the flaw. A catastrophic technical failure had suddenly struck the company's core operating system, bringing all major financial transactions to a grinding halt, threatening to crash their stock and trigger a public relations nightmare. A frantic Elena immediately summoned the entire IT and engineering leadership team to the main crisis meeting room, where Daniel quietly followed. The room was a mess of shouting executives and blinking red screens. Daniel, being a technical maintenance expert with a profound, almost intuitive understanding of the legacy architecture, quickly analyzed the complex diagnostics and, with surprising speed and insight, identified the root cause. A critical timing error embedded in an old, long-forgotten design blueprint from a previous decade. A file that was deliberately excluded from modern maintenance checks. One senior engineer, visibly sweating and desperate, scoffed loudly, attempting one last time to dismiss Daniel's low-level authority. If he's right about that obscure, decade-old file, I will walk out of here on my hands and retire tomorrow. Ignoring the mockery, Daniel immediately went to work. He didn't use the keyboard. He guided the senior technician, telling him exactly which lines of deprecated code to isolate and override, attempting the complex repair right there in the middle of the high-stakes conference room. Elena stood silently nearby, watching his focused intensity, dedication, and clear competence. A look of strange, total trust in her eyes, a trust she rarely gave anyone. Twist 1. Daniel completed the incredibly difficult multi-system repair in exactly 25 minutes. The entire core system sprang back online, running perfectly, just moments before the crisis could become public knowledge among the shareholders and media. He didn't just fix it, he stabilized the system with a subtle optimization. The senior employees in the room stared at Daniel, their jaws dropped in absolute astonishment at his speed and skill, realizing their careers had just been saved by the man they mocked. Elena, regaining her composure, calmly announced to the stunned team, effective immediately, Daniel Hayes is promoted to Chief Technical Specialist on my personal advisory team. All urgent technical system issues must prioritize consultation with him before any further major action is taken. Do you understand? Daniel could scarcely believe the words he was hearing. He had gone from suspected pervert and ridiculed father to critical, promoted asset in a single afternoon. When the emergency meeting finally concluded, Elena deliberately called him back to her office for a private conversation, waiting until the door was firmly shut. She spoke in a near whisper, her guard finally, truly down, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of her confession. That day at the beach, Daniel, I wasn't truly angry that you saw me. I was angry because you saw the real me, the tired, lonely, terrified person who is the complete opposite of the calculated, cold image I've spent years desperately constructing for the world, for my board, and for myself. Daniel met her gaze, his expression gentle and understanding, his empathy palpable. Everyone is entitled to a moment of weakness, Miss Voss. That moment does not in any way diminish how fundamentally strong and brilliant you are. It makes you human. Elena was completely silenced by his simple, profound acceptance of her humanity, which felt like an absolution. Twist 2. She then spoke an observation about him, delivered with quiet intensity, that no one, especially not Daniel, could have ever anticipated. I saw you looking at me that day, and it wasn't the look of a man simply looking at a woman's body, the way all those executives did. It was the look of a person who recognized the deep, cavernous loneliness within my eyes because you carry a similar quiet burden of responsibility yourself. Elena leaned in close, the barrier between them completely dissolved, and asked softly, her question full of fragile hope and heart-wrenching vulnerability. Daniel, if I were to give you a genuine, honest opportunity to see the real me, the vulnerable one behind the corporate armor, the woman I really am, would you truly dare to look and truly accept what you see? Elena soon extended an invitation that was purely personal and deeply symbolic. She asked Daniel and Lily to join her for a relaxed evening stroll along Suncrest Beach, the very place where their unexpected, awkward connection had begun. It was her attempt to reclaim the memory and start anew. The evening was beautiful. The gentle breeze caressed the air, the waves lapped steadily against the shore, and the golden streetlights cast a soft, welcoming reflection on the damp sand. Lily ran ahead, completely delighted, excitedly collecting small stones and presenting them as precious treasures to Elena, who accepted each one with genuine gratitude. Elena walked right beside Daniel, and for the first time in years, she truly felt like a normal woman, not the CEO. Her restricting power suit had been replaced by simple, comfortable trousers and a soft ivory sweater, which looked luxurious yet unassuming. She began to speak freely, recounting the intense pain and isolation of her childhood. Being groomed as the perfect successor, the constant emotional distance from her parents, and the unbearable professional and personal solitude that no one in her life knew about. I never had a friend, she confessed quietly. I had partners, rivals, and employees. Never a friend who didn't want something from me. She described how the glittering success of the company felt profoundly empty when she went home to her sterile, massive apartment. Daniel listened with complete, unwavering attention, offering a steady, empathetic presence. He didn't offer advice. He offered acceptance, as if he had been subconsciously waiting for this deep, honest moment for years. Elena stopped walking and looked at him directly, her eyes reflecting true concern, seeking validation. Did you ever think, even for a moment, that I was fundamentally a bad or selfish person, especially after how coldly I treated you initially? Daniel smiled gently, shaking his head reassuringly. No, Elena, I only ever thought you were terrified. You built an immense wall, and the wind blew it open. I only ever thought you just hadn't met the person yet who would allow you to stop being aggressively strong and constantly guarded 24 hours a day. I know what it's like to have to be strong for someone else, but you've been strong just for yourself, which is harder. Elena froze completely on the sand, stunned by his profound insight. Her heart skipped an unexpected beat at his incredibly precise observation. It was the most understanding and validating thing anyone had ever said to her in her life, confirming his earlier observation that he saw her loneliness. "You see things that no one else bothers to look for?" she murmured, a slight catch in her throat. Suddenly, Lily ran back, tripping slightly, and wrapped her small arms around Elena's legs, looking up with simple devotion. "Ms. Elena, can you please stay here and play with me forever? Daddy makes boring dinner, but you make me laugh." Elena naturally bent down, immediately wrapping the child in a spontaneous, loving embrace and burying her face in Lily's hair. The action was genuine, coming from a place of deep maternal yearning and acceptance, a stark contrast to her corporate stiffness. Daniel watched the beautiful, intimate scene unfold, feeling an intense conviction that something truly fundamental was shifting, forging a bond that transcended their job titles. He saw his daughter's future reflected in Elena's eyes, full of the warmth that had been missing since his wife passed away. This wasn't just attraction, it was connection. "Lily likes you," he whispered, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's the highest approval rating you can get around here." As Lily ran off again, chasing the tide with a happy yell, Elena leaned in close to Daniel, the salt air on her skin, and whispered, her voice husky with raw, undeniable emotion. "I genuinely want to become someone your daughter can fully trust and rely on, Daniel. I want to earn that trust from both of you. It's the only thing I've ever truly wanted to build that wasn't a company." Exactly 1 week later, Elena made an unprecedented and surprising move. She drove herself alone, without any prior warning or entourage, to the modest apartment complex where Daniel and Lily lived. Daniel had spent the day cleaning and nervously pacing, unsure what to expect from a chief technical specialist promotion or the strange new personal atmosphere. She arrived without any bodyguards or her conspicuous luxury car, just her and a simple bag containing a delicious, home-cooked meal she had personally prepared in her professional-grade kitchen. Lily immediately cheered upon seeing her, shrieking with delight and running to hug Elena's legs as if greeting a long-lost, cherished family member. Daniel was visibly flustered by the unexpected, highly personal visit. "Miss Voss, Elena, why are you here? You really didn't need to go to all this trouble." Elena replied softly, her posture completely relaxed for the first time, holding the simple shopping bag. "Because, Daniel, I want to truly see your life, without the protective filter of my office or my corporate status. I need to be here, where things are real." They cooked a simple, delicious dinner together in Daniel's tiny lived-in kitchen, the two of them moving awkwardly at first, then finding an easy rhythm. Elena found herself laughing constantly and genuinely smiling, an expression that almost none of her corporate colleagues had ever witnessed. She was completely unconcerned with the modest surroundings. Lily talked enthusiastically about her day at school, and Elena listened with focused, loving attention, like a true second mother learning all the details of the child's life, asking meaningful questions only a caring adult would know to ask. After the simple warm meal, Elena helped Daniel clear the plates, a surreal image of the CEO scrubbing dishes. She then walked to the front door, preparing to leave, but then stood there hesitating, her hand hovering over the knob, unable to step outside and break the comfort of the moment. She finally spoke, her voice almost a whisper, releasing one final vulnerability that she needed to confess. "That day at the beach, when I caught you looking at me, Daniel, I felt utterly exposed and ashamed of what you saw. It was a failure of control." Daniel inhaled deeply, meeting her gaze, his expression unchanging in its gentle warmth. "I understand that feeling, Elena, and I truly apologize once more for my carelessness. It was purely an accident." Elena slowly shook her head, a soft smile spreading across her lips. "No, please don't apologize again, because that day you finally saw me, the vulnerable human part I had never dared to show to anyone before, the person who needs help tying her own scarf sometimes." She took a single deliberate step toward him, closing the short distance and locking her gaze with his, making the final, most vulnerable ask of her life. "Daniel, if I want to stop being so alone, if I want to contribute to this home and stay permanently in the lives of you and Lily, not as a boss, but as your partner, would you sincerely allow it?" Daniel smiled slowly, genuinely, his acceptance simple and deeply real. "My door has no curtains, Elena, and my heart is finally ready. If the wind blows, nothing in here will ever be covered up again. You are welcome here, always." A palpable wave of relief washed over Elena, settling the tension she hadn't realized she was holding. She didn't move immediately, instead meeting his gaze with a depth of clarity that was breathtaking. Daniel gently reached out and took her hand, his thumb resting over her knuckles. "But I need to know one thing," he added, his tone serious but tender. "This promotion, this new life, it doesn't mean leaving everything else behind, but it means prioritizing. If the system crashes again, or the board calls, how do you manage both? Because here, we don't do things halfway." Elena squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "I've already made the choice, Daniel. The company is built on 1,000 walls. This home is built on honesty, and I choose honesty. I have systems in place now, including you, my chief technical specialist, to handle the crises. My priority is no longer just maintaining the image of power, but building a life of substance. And substance is right here, with Lily." She let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. "I think Lily just fired the CEO and hired the new mom." Elena's eyes sparkled with relief and unshed tears of happiness. She chuckled softly, then blushed deeply at his warm, sincere, and utterly unique invitation. Lily immediately ran over and gently pulled the hands of the two adults together, physically uniting them in her innocence. The final image. All three of them were soon sitting comfortably crammed together on the small worn sofa, looking at a children's book. Elena was nestled happily between Daniel and Lily, the warm, soft light from a single floor lamp illuminating the happy, peaceful smiles on all three faces. The perfect, hopeful picture of a beautiful, newly formed family finding solace and permanence in each other. If you believe stories about genuine connection, unexpected love, and second chances deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to NL Touching Stories. We celebrate the heroes who see the real person behind the mask.